Yes, indeed. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like, for whatever reason, my camera is like super sharp right now. Like, I never see my camera this clean. I have no idea what this means. What am I doing? What am I doing? My camera's like super clean, right? At least my screen. My screen is super clean. And so it's like, man, wait a minute. I usually get more noise in the footage that I'm recording. So anyway, I'm encouraged by that. I didn't even wipe this bad boy down. It might be just the Lord is just blessing the footage. So hopefully the footage on YouTube and Facebook is clean, because it is on my computer. All right, so let's have a little fun. Let's have this conversation. So, many of you know I've commented on this, and over the years. So, the idea of Christian nationalism. In fact, I remember being at a conference last year, sitting beside Vodi Bakum, and someone asked him, "What's Christian nationalism?" And at the time, he said it was basically a fake term that was used by those who are on the left or who are woke for pushing back against social justice and being woke and stuff. So all that stuff is reality for some people. Since then, this was 2021, January 2021. Since then, the idea of Christian nationalism, people have written books about it. You have some people like dogging it, like, man, you guys are this, that, and the third. And then you got other people, particularly lately. I've seen lately more evangelicals, particularly on the conservative side, defending the term nationalism, Christian nationalism, and talking about it. I'm seeing it. So it's funny. It's really ironic. And the irony of it is that, and I'm about to let you see this clip real quick from someone named Ali Stuckey, and she's talking about this. And I thought it was fascinating watching her kind of explain what nationalism is. So I want to have a real conversation about this, because I do think Jesus has something to say about nationalism, even if he doesn't address it directly. And I do think a lot of us need to remember, like, think about what we're saying when we use particular terms. Like I've said before, when you use terms like, you're not a Christian if you, whatever, however you finish that sentence is saying that person is going to hell. There are no non-Christians in hell. So if you're telling people, like, if you say you're not a Christian if you vote, no Christian will vote Democrat, then what you're saying is that a person who may only vote once every 4 years for a political party is going to hell because of that vote, right? Maybe people mean that, maybe they don't mean that, maybe they just think, no, you shouldn't because of all these different reasons. But our words matter, right? And so this idea of nationalism, it's really interesting, because I've seen those who are on the conservative side, my conservative friends, adapt it and trying to reframe it. Just like, but then they shamed those who were on the left. I got friends on the left. They were all called woke, or all these different names, social justice warrior, cultural Marxist. They were all called woke, and there was this big deal about, just even if you cared about an aspect of it, right? So it's really funny to watch the conservatives pretty much do the same things that the liberals did, or the left or the right did, in defending their terminology. But that's not what this video is about. I wanted to get into something different, because I don't really care about, I'm not woke, I don't bang with the left at all. But I don't really bang with the right either, right? I'm not really like, oh, I'm in the right. So I'm just like, I'm not really, those things don't matter. You can put me on the stand and I'll swear, I'll tell the truth. I'll call out the Republicans and the Democrats equally. And the Democrats have been shucking and jiving black people for a long time. But that's a different conversation. But I want to talk about this issue, nationalism. And so I was watching a video. This video just showed up on my feed on Facebook. And it's by Ali Stuckey. She's a popular YouTube channel, see her on Twitter, my feed. And there are things that she says I definitely agree with. I think she's on point when it comes to gender and sexuality and stuff like that. I think she's on point. The things I agree with what she says. But when it comes to this stuff, I'm kind of like, I'm not sure about that. And so I want to show you this brief video clip. Now, you know me, I'm the low-key OG gangster with it, so I ain't going to pull up the video on the side. I'm going to just show you my phone. When I get my followers up, when I get a few more followers, we're going to build a production value up. But until then, I ain't doing no straight up and down production. We low-key OG gangster with it, right? So I'm going to show you this video and let you hear her describe her perspective on what she thinks nationalism is. And I want to talk about how to think about this. So here's Ali Stuckey with nationalism.
That word nationalism makes a lot of people uncomfortable, even on the conservative side, especially Christians, because you have been told that nationalism is synonymous with Nazism, that nationalism is synonymous with fascism, that nationalism is anti-God, is anti-Christianity, and anti-Jesus. That is simply not true. Of course, depending on how you define it, it's important for us to define our terms, but nationalism in its truest and historic sense is simply putting the interest and the well-being of your country first, even at the expense of, at times, the interest and well-being of other countries. Now, that is only scary to some people when it's coming from the right, or when it's coming from especially a Western country. If America says that, if politicians in Britain say that, if there was some rogue politician in Canada who still believed that and said that, that would be called white supremacist somehow. That would be called Nazi and fascist and extremist and radical and unloving, unempathetic, and all of those things. But the fact of the matter is that the institutions that have been designated by God to exercise authority over their country are doing the good and the righteous thing by putting the interest and the safety and the security of their people first, because God designated.
All right, so the video is about 3.5 minutes long, and she's basically giving a definition of nationalism. So she's not calling it Christian nationalism, but she's saying nationalism is an anti-Christian, right? So, but she's pretty much trying to redeem the word and remix it. And if we're being honest, I think she's saying good stuff right there. I don't think she's wrong at all in saying this is what nationalism is, and it's not anti-Christian in the sense of putting your values, the country first. On one level, I don't think she's wrong, but there's a couple things I want to just bring up in this post that I think are problematic, though. One, the term Christian nationalism, she's defining it as putting your country first and not anti-Christian. She didn't call it Christian nationalism, to her credit, but I'm going to talk about Christian nationalism. She remixed it and called it something else and said it's not anti-Christian. The problem, though, even with the statement that it's not anti-Christian, is the church is not about creating and defending borders and nationalism and things like that. At least that would not have been what the church understood their role to be in the early church. I mean, in the first couple centuries, the church, the people who were closer to people, who were closest to Jesus, who actually wrote they didn't understand themselves to be like, I could show you a book right now by Rodney Stark called Cities of God, and how the church felt it was their obligation to care for people. They had people that made in the image of God reality. They weren't focused on like what Rome is doing or what these people are doing, right? So I don't know where in the scriptures the priority of a nation, apart from certain preaching the gospel and making disciples, is really given to the church, that we should care about the nation in that way. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. I'm just saying we shouldn't pretend like that's what the Bible commands us to do, right? So she goes on to talk about nations are like families, and you're going to appoint your family. So I'm not saying that's wrong. It's not sinful, but I think it's a slippery slope. It gets dangerous. And let me explain why. Because the term Christian nationalism, and now I'm not talking about what she's saying now, just the term. These people, Christian nationalism, take back the country for God, those things, right? And a lot of it is done through policy. So it's like, we got to vote Republican, we got to vote conservative, because we're trying to make the country, the laws reflect what God wants, and that's Christian. And on one level, that's a good thing. But here's the problem and here's the first question that we need to always ask when you hear the word Christian nationalism, right? And she did say you have to define your terms, but most people aren't defining it the way she is. That's a newer definition. the first question that we have to ask when we're thinking Christian nationalism is, well, what makes something Christian? What is it that makes something Christian? What is it that makes a country Christian? What is it? Is it policy? Is it the what makes something Christian? The question that you have to ask is it the laws that govern that nation or the faith of people in that nation? Whatever that means, right? So are there laws in countries that are not considered Christian that are equal to our laws? In other words, if you go to an Islamic country, do they not have laws and rules and things like that? Consequences for sins and things like that, right? They all do. So then what makes something Christian? The challenge with Christian nationalism, as many are championing it, is that it's about voting a particular way because you're a Christian to promote laws that are closer to what you perceive God's will to be. So like an example of like abortion, right? I think abortion is deplorable. I do. I think it's ironic that, you know, we don't accept people. We'll put people in a mental institution for suicide, but isn't killing a baby inside of you, isn't that kind of like suicide a little bit? Because that's you, and that's a different conversation. But the reality is this, though. If Christian nationalism is about promoting and voting for laws that go into the nation that restrict evil in a certain way, and that's Christian, here's the problem with that. That makes Christian be about law keeping, right? That makes Christian mean about keeping laws. So your country is Christian if they have these laws in place. And I think that's problematic for the Bible's sake. Like, I think Matthew 28 is pretty clear on what the Great Commission is, right? So here's what Jesus says. And this is, we all know this stuff, right? We all know these things. Matthew 28 is very clear. You got Jesus saying, go into all the world and preach the gospel, right? Making disciples of people. So at least by the language and what we saw the early church doing is they were interacting with people, interacting with other people, trying to get them to believe in Jesus. They weren't worried about if they were Roman or Greek or whatever. They didn't worry about what their political situation was. It was believing in Jesus. We want to present to you this Jesus, right? Acts 17. Let me tell you about this unknown God. And let me even take the quotes that your philosophers talked about Zeus and show you that that was about actually Jesus, who I'm talking about, right? So you have that reality. The Christian national is not about creating laws, at least the early church didn't be that way. It was about sharing the gospel with people in whatever nation you're in. So here's a real question to my friends who are promoting and owning and actually loving the term Christian nationalism, who are using it to push back against the left because they see it as a political pushback. Here's my real question to you who are trying to say, I just want the nation to be more Christian. Here's a genuine question that requires a genuine answer. And I know you can't answer me now unless you're watching, but here's a question. How many people have you shared the gospel with in your neighborhood? How many people have you shared the gospel with on your job? How many? Because that's what Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. He didn't say change the laws where people live, because even if you got rid of abortion, let's just say you got rid of it, is America more Christian? Like, are more people believing in Jesus? The whole point of being a Christian, right? Christians used to be called the way at first in the Bible. And then Christians was a derogatory term given to people who follow Jesus. So what it means to be a Christian is a follower of Jesus. right? Now, there's a moral code that we have, but being a Christian is not about following the law. That's what being a Jew is. The Jews follow the law. Their confidence is in the law. Their confidence is in, Romans had more confidence in Caesar and political structures. Christians say we follow Jesus and we do things because we want to honor the Lord, but one of our primary responsibilities is to tell other people to believe in him. So if you're really serious about Christian nationalism, then how many people do you share the gospel with? Because if you're only trying to get people to vote a certain way, shaming people for not voting that way because you're trying to pass laws, then how is that no different than what Paul warns about in Galatians chapter 3? Paul says this in Galatians 3. He says, "You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It was before your eyes that Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. Let me ask you only this. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or hearing by faith? Are you so foolish, having begun by the Spirit? Are you now being perfected by the flesh?" Now, they were talking about circumcision and stuff like that. But he gets that, but he's correcting them for thinking that circumcision, which is an act of the law in the Old Testament, is what matters. But then he talks about, for all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse. So Paul equates the law. Now, that was the law of Moses, but I think it extends to any law that is not faith in Jesus Christ. The law of Christ is not political. It's anthropological. It's about people, right? So if you're going to say something is Christian, biblically speaking, that means people who believe in Jesus, not laws that are passed that restrict evil. That's not inherently Christian. But this term Christian nationalism is making you think we got to vote this way to do this. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to vote against evil. Don't get me wrong. That's all I'm saying. But what I'm saying is my problem is, don't call it Christian then. Because when you say Christian nationalism, this is what it means to be a Christian. No, what you're saying is we're trying to promote law and institute law to govern people's lives, but none of these people are believers. Do we honestly think that God is not sovereign over abortion and that he's pleased with that law being ended, but not with people believing in him? So my question to my Christian nationalist friends who shame people for not voting conservative, and who have you shared the gospel with? Because that's what it means to be Christian. Like, do your neighbors even know you're saved? Are you just a nice person? Shit, I know some nice Muslims, some Jehovah's Witnesses, man. They bake some good cookies. Who are you sharing the gospel with? Because that's what it means to make a nation Christian, is that people are believing in Jesus, hence the word Christian. And if some of those people happen to be with positions of authority and power, like Constantine did, or politicians, they may say we're going to push us through that. And I'm fine with that. But the problem is that going into all the world and preaching the gospel is what makes people Christian. Faith in Jesus. Romans 10:9 and 10. But now what we're saying is Christian nationalism. To be a Christian, we need to vote and have certain laws passed to restrict evil. But that's never really been the command for us. Here's another problem with this idea of what Ali Stuckey said. Here's a problem with what she said. People are not monolithic, right? They're not monolithic. So she's defining nationalism one way, but not everyone's defining it that way. So here's the problem you have. I don't think we realize what kind of society we live in. So you remember, Burger King's slogan is "Have it your way," right? We live in a Burger King society where we personalize everything, right? We personalize our desires, what I think is right. I personalize sexuality despite science. I personalize English language. These are my pronouns. I don't even know what these words are. These would have been words that were used in comic books and stuff like that, like Zer, Zaza. Now these are, so we personalize everything, right? To the point where you don't even know if the conversation you're having with the person is a real conversation because you don't know what they mean by these words. So nationalism, Christian, has been personalized. So there's a ton of people who do not think of it the way she is. Well, no, we just care about our country. I don't think there's anything wrong with caring about your country. But Christ says, I think the Bible is clear, like we care about people, like Imago Dei, people are made in God's image. Those are people in other countries. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have laws that govern our country. No question. I fully support that. But I think that when we're acting as if, or some people are acting as if the Christian nationalism is about loving country above other else. And I would say, no, Ali, Christian nationalism, if you're a Christian, you don't love your country above all else. You love God, and then that extends to humanity. And there's compassion towards people. Like Jesus came for the Jews, but he definitely went to where the Gentiles are. He definitely blessed the Gentiles. He went down to Samaria in John 4 for 2 days and preached the gospel down there after talking to a Samaritan woman at the well, right? It's not about like national boundaries. Yeah, he cared about Jerusalem in that sense and all of those things. Yeah, he cared about the land and all of that. But that wasn't like what he was telling people to care about. It was like, look, we need to care about who I am, what I've done, and share that with other people. So again, these terms aren't monolithic. So you're using terms to define something. Oh yeah, I agree with that. And then but that's not what everyone means by Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism for a lot of people, biblically speaking, is law. It's law. It's voting. It's being a conservative, voting at particular things to go against the left. Christian nationalism is a political term, not a biblical term. Nationalism is a political term. It's not a biblical term. That doesn't mean it may not be anti-Christian in its essence, but you can be anti-Christian in the way you think about, promote, and designate that. I think we have to be careful. You got stuff that, here's another reason why. You know what else is clear? Whoa. Matthew 23, I think he says some stuff about nationalism. I think he does. He doesn't use that term, and he's not thinking of it in the way that we are thinking of it. But I think Jesus is 100% saying something in Matthew 23. Saying something. So again, to my Christian nationalist friends, I think you have to be careful because you're creating a dynamic in which you want people to care about the passing of laws, but laws do not make people Christian. And if laws don't make people, laws don't make a nation Christian. If Matthew 7 is accurate, which I think it is, and Jesus said, not many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we cast out demons in your name? So there will be people who do mighty works in his name. He says, I don't know you. You did all these things, but you're not a Christian. You didn't put your faith in me. You didn't do these things to honor me. Let's just be clear. A lot of people who are Christian nationalists, they're doing it because they want a better country for their kids. No shame in that. I told my boys a couple weeks ago, man, I don't want y'all to grow up in a certain type of country. But I also don't want them to think that they can only thrive and glorify God unless they grow up in a certain type of country. We have no idea what the Lord's will is for our nation. Right? So when you're saying this Christian nationalism, this is about law. It's really about law. It's not about like evangelism. Like who have you shared the gospel with? It's not about that. It's about passing laws, and laws have never, even God's law. It's so funny to hear people act like, well, this is what the Bible works. God's law didn't work for the Jews in the Old Testament. Laws don't make a person Christian or a nation Christian. What makes a person a Christian is I believe in Jesus. What makes a nation a Christian is people believe in Jesus. Now, does it affect what we do? Sure. But that's not what these people are talking about. Matthew 23, Jesus said, here's a scary thing. Jesus starts off Matthew 23 and he says this, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do. This is crazy. So Jesus is saying the scribes and the Pharisees, these are people that reject me. People that reject me still sit on Moses' seat, meaning God is giving them the authority and the knowledge to still teach you what Moses is talking about and all that stuff. Teach you to, but so listen to what they say, but don't imitate what they do. That's a crazy verse, fam. Because there's a lot of us that gravitate, oh, listen to this guy. Oh, James Lindsay is more solid than pastors. James Lindsay is going to hell if he doesn't believe in Jesus. And he's not going to go to hell, to heaven over Tim Keller, over some stuff. Fam, these people are wilding right now, right? They are wilding right now. Your favorite theologian, Paul said this, look, Paul said, look, if I have all wisdom and all knowledge, if I can do all these things, I lack love, I'm nothing. Some of your favorite theologians that get you hype and riled up and ready to culture war, these folks ain't got a lick of love in them except towards the people that they care about, and everybody does that. That's different for the Christian. It's different, right? So here, Jesus says off the break, look, these people are against me, but I'm allowing them to still have this platform so they can tell you what's up. So there are people in this day and age who God has given a platform, allowing them, using the knowledge that they have, to speak some truth, but these people don't even believe in them. They're not really to him. They don't belong to him, right? And then he goes through later on a bunch of woes. And he says this. He says, but woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves nor allow others who would enter to go in. Now, I'm taking this and applying it to today. I think this right here, you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, is when you say stuff like, you're not a Christian if you do this. That's dangerous, fam. Because Christianity is about progressive sanctification, about relationship, about growth, about decide. It takes time. I'm a much different dude than I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago when I first came into the faith. There's some things that are still there. I'm still a little gangster with it. But like, there's a lot that I've grown in, right? There's things that I would never do now or say now that I would have said before. You know, it's like, dude, it's a process. You grow. You start telling people they're not a Christian, you're saying there's no process to your growth. There's no process to your life. That's dangerous. That's anti-Christian. That's anti-Christian. Can you imagine a person who's a new believer, right? Who, let's just say you're a conservative. You're a new believer, right? You go to a conservative church. You're a new Christian. You've agreed with abortion, all this stuff. You're a brand new Christian. And the pastor gets up and says, you're not a Christian if you vote Democrat because you support abortion and all of that. Now, you genuinely put your faith in Jesus. You're still in process, working through those, and you hear the pastor say that in that church. You know what that just did? That person who hasn't had the chance to grow and develop and understand, they think they're not a Christian. They might walk out of that church. You shut people out of the kingdom. That's dangerous, fam. That's dangerous. Jesus says this also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte. And when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. You do all this evangelism to save one person, but then the way that you teach that person, the way you teach them to engage with the law and all of this, it makes them twice as a convert to go to hell. So they're actually worse off because of you. I think that's happening today. I think the left and the right, the left has demanded that people be about social justice at times and have shamed people. And you create in these structures where everything is about this issue. Pfft. No, sir. The right is no different. You create these dynamics, and all of a sudden it's like, you're not a Christian. So you win these people, and then they're twice as likely to go to hell as you are because they don't understand the foundation, the moral foundation, the fruits of the Spirit. I remember telling the dude, hey, bro, you just got to be careful, fam. I get it. I'm with the smoke, too. Like, I'm a tough dude. I get it. But you got to be careful, man. And he was like, yeah, right, bro. You're just woke. All the woke people say that. And I was like, wow. So now you can't even correct people for being unloving, which is a fundamental truth of being a Christian. 1 John 4:20. You're not a Christian I don't care what nation you live in and who you voted for. You're not a Christian if you do not love your brother whom you have seen. He said you do not love God whom you haven't seen. And you see people just calling people out. You make people, you shut the kingdom of heaven out of people. I mean, I don't want to, that's not directly what Jesus was talking about. I get it. I'm applying it to our current day because I do think what we're watching is basically Pharisees fighting Pharisees over who gets to determine the interpretation of the law. You're fighting with other believers over non-believers and what laws they're going to pass that seem more Christian. There is no such. The law of Christ has nothing to do with ending abortion or going after social justice. These are all good things. The racial justice. These are all good things. I think it's great to do those things. But those don't make a person a Christian. There's no such thing as a Christian nation because you have Judeo-Christian values. So what? The Jews had Yahweh values straight up and down and didn't do it. The Pharisees saw Jesus and heard him. Jesus said, look, I taught every day in the temple. I taught every day in the open. If I said something wrong, why didn't you say it then? If I did something wrong, why'd you hit me? Like what makes something Christian is not the laws that govern the country or who you vote for. I'm not saying that doesn't say we shouldn't vote a certain way or have standards, but that doesn't make someone a Christian or a non-Christian. It's deeper than that. And we're so shallow as an evangelical church. And again, not everyone, but we're so shallow that we think that we're actually doing the will of God and we're standing up for God and being Christian because of how we vote. That's not going to make you a Christian, fam. That may inform your Christianity may be informed by it, but so anyway, all this to say, I think Christian nationalism is a dumb term. Not because, the left is trying to shame the right because of the term woke. I think, first of all, I think both sides are whack for real, right? In many ways. But I think it's a whack term, Christian nationalism, because it makes it seem like what makes someone Christian is the laws that they support. And laws never make someone Christian. That doesn't mean we shouldn't support righteousness. That's not what I'm saying. But that doesn't make someone Christian. The Pharisees loved the law. They added to it so much. They loved it so much. They tried to defend it and they added to it. Paul in Philippians 3 said, man, I was blameless according to the law. Zeal, trained by Gamaliel, a Hebrew of Hebrews. He said, I reject all of that law keeping, all of that. And I think what we see now is like basically your Christianity is measured by what laws do you. It's fascinating to me to watch this play out. And then people get mad at me and saying I'm playing both sides of I'm woke. Then you have to be asleep if you don't see this. This is crazy to me. But what do I know? I'm just an ex-street dude who's from the streets. So I think Ali Beth Stuckey, there's some stuff she says I bang with. I think she's on point. I think this nationalism take, I think she should leave it alone, fam. I don't think we should try to teach anyone to be so proud of their country that they will shame other Christians, other believers, for not being proud of the country in the same way. And that's exactly what's happening. Exactly what's happening. Said it before, and I'm going to say it again, that these are the people that we call friends. Friends. How many of us have them? Y'all know about that. Only a few of y'all know about that. All right, man, I'm out of here. Thanks for giving me your time. Just want to drop that with you. I'm back. I've been chilling for a minute, but I got a lot to talk about. And we're going to get it in. Me and Strack will be back next week with Cross Examine. Don't forget to go pick this bad boy up. A lot of people are watching this documentary on Jeffrey Dahmer. Go pick this up. Serial Killer Smiling Pictures. This album will tell you why everyone's fascinated by this Jeffrey Dahmer documentary on Netflix. Well, I think it's a movie. I can't remember if it's a movie or it's something. I ain't seen it yet. I watched enough of this stuff when I was working on this project. Go pick that up from iTunes, Spotify, whatever. Give it a shout. If you like what we're talking about, like and subscribe to the channel. Leave me comments, not in the actual video, so that spikes the stuff. You know, we're all slaves, right? Slaves obey your masters. The master is the algorithm. I got to obey it to some degree so that people see these videos, which I hope are helpful. All right. Appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. Kirk Kennedy signing off. Grace and peace.